I'm David Head, and welcome to Fins to Fan Leaves, the channel where we explore the connection between marine life husbandry and cannabis cultivation. Today, we will be exploring the connection of nutrients, starting with nitrogen, and considering a concept of nutrient recycling that I like to call the cycle of yum. So, whet your appetites, grab a snack. Today, it's all about food. Nutrients. Everybody knows that a nice, varied diet is always the healthiest. We all need nutrients, and as each creature eats, they absorb nutrients and process them. And that byproduct, their bodily waste, is always consumed by something else, like a dish being handed down a dinner table, but with just a sprinkle of salt or some other seasoning before they pass it. That system of nutrient passing is what I call the cycle of yum. But what are nutrients? Well, nutrients are substances that organisms use to grow, maintain life, and reproduce. They can be basic elements or more complex compounds. And that list of beneficial nutrients is long. Again, as we all know that a diet full of variety is often the healthiest. But for the sake of simplicity, we're going to cover the essentials. Ironically, they're called essential nutrients. Those are the ones that are necessary for the bare minimum of healthy development and sustained life. Those are known as essential macronutrients. And the two that we will be exploring the connection between are nitrogen and phosphorus. Now, to make it even easier, macro means large, and micro means small. So, macronutrients are nutrients that are used in large amounts. Micronutrients, you guessed it, are used in small amounts. Nitrogen and phosphorus are two of the most essential and common nutrients for cannabis, flowers, herbs, decorative macroalgae, algae that consumes macronutrients, aggressive algae, beneficial and aggressive bacteria. But too much of a good thing is bad, and if someone eats too much, it changes from a comfortable dinner to an eating competition. So, to review this section, 1. Nutrients are substances that all organisms use to grow, maintain life, and reproduce. 2. Two groups of nutrients, micronutrients, small amounts, and macronutrients, large amounts, are the ones we focus on. Number 3. Nitrogen and phosphorus are two macronutrients common in all gardening. Now that we understand that nitrogen is food and that all organisms need it, let's talk about that cycle of yum. Nature is like a giant dinner table with a perpetual feast. Everyone noshing, taking a helping of this or that before passing it along the table. But every time the dish changes hands, the diner adds a little something for the next plate. Oh, that's very considerate. The dish that we're focusing on is nitrogen. And nitrogen is a major component of chlorophyll. Well, what's chlorophyll? Chlorophyll is the compound that plants use to produce sugar, which is food, from water, CO2 that animals breathe, and light from the sun in a process known as photosynthesis. A plant is healthy because there is enough nitrogen to enable the plant to feed itself. And as a result, green means nitrogen rich. But how do we pass the plate? Well, these plants don't live forever, and they return these nutrients to the soil and water when they decompose. That turns into something called green manure. And they're also eaten by hungry animals. Animals also use nitrogen for many different compounds of their own, and they get it by eating nitrogen-rich plants. And as they excrete waste, they continue to pass the plate. As bacteria and other organisms consume the nitrogen and ammonia, which is just another form of nitrogen, those are slowly assimilated into the environments of soil and water. And guess what? The dish has made its way around the table and everyone is ready for another helping. That is something called bioavailability, where a creature has processed a nutrient to make it available to another organism. Now let's review that section. 1. The nutrient nitrogen is essential for plants to eat. 2. All organisms consume nutrients and excrete byproducts. 3. Those byproducts are food for another organism which is consumed and produces further byproducts. 4. As they are consumed, the nutrients change form and are recycled, thus completing the cycle of yum. Now that we know that nitrogen is food and have been introduced to the process of the cycle of yum, here are some concepts to take to the garden. 1. If there's food, someone's going to eat it, creatures or bacteria. 2. Nitrogen is essential to plant, animal, and microorganism health. 3. Green means nitrogen rich. 4. Aggressive growth is a sign of a nitrogen rich environment, either soil or water. 5. If we want healthy green plants, they need a healthy diet of nitrogen. 6. If we have green algae or problematic nitrifying bacteria, we have an abundance of nitrogen and its source needs to be identified. 7. These problems can be reduced by lessening light and nitrogen, starving out the algae. 8. The same is true of bacterial colonies. 9. Do not overfeed, and if problems occur, control the input, output, and the number of diners in the cycle of yum. Well, now that we know that, let's apply some of these concepts to our garden. Things are looking very, very nice in our classroom garden. Let's take a little tour and start getting to know everybody again. So here in the back left corner, we have our Malawi Gold from South Africa. It's pure sativa, and it is performing as one would expect most sativas to. It's really stretching out because I'm allowing them to grow horizontally instead of vertically, or encouraging them more accurately. And as a result, it's going to take up quite a bit of space. We have its twin here in the back right corner, also a Malawi Gold. Between the two of them, I expect we're going to have quite a little forest in the back. It's going to be very nice. Those may take up to 18 to 20 weeks. So they will be the longest models in our classroom for this series. In the middle, by Easy Genetics, we have a sour grapes by Easy Genetics. And it is doing very, very nicely. A very good example of what a lot of hybrids look like these days. It has close nodal spacing, which means spacing between the sets of leaves, which also are where a lot of bud sites will form. So that's a very, very good thing. I'm excited to see how that continues to develop some of its other leaves and catch up with the rest. We also have, by Barney's Farm, our Blueberry Afghan, the same one that is out in the greenhouse as well, just a small cutting. And it did look funky for a while because it was re-vegging in likeness to its mother. And I was also doing spectral experimentation, which did zap it a little bit. But it's fully recovered. It's very, very happy and healthy now. And just like with the rest, I'm trying to keep a very open canopy to encourage an equal environment for the entire tent. Next, we have our marigolds, which are notably smaller than they have been in the past. But that is because I am also trying to discourage, let me get down here, trying to discourage any sort of environment that harbors pests or gives them any space to hide. And if you consider all of these not as things we're taking care of, but as variables to our parameters that we're trying to maintain, having that bit of flow space allows for things to stay even. Lastly, we have also by Easy Genetics the killer guava unicorn. Now, this is also another fine example of very deliberate breeding with that tendency to have the broad leaves to soak up as much light as possible, but not have a ton of space in between the nodes. The scent coming off of this one already is reminiscent of skunk, so I know that it's going to be a stinky one. Now, given what we know, clearly there's enough food, but it's not excessive food. There's no rot in here, which means only the creatures, not the bacteria, are eating. We know that nitrogen is essential to plant, animal, and microorganism growth. All of these plants are quite happy, except for possibly the one in the center, in relation to how much nitrogen they're getting. That one may require more nitrogen than the rest because the photosynthetic process is being facilitated so fast to try to help it catch up. Now, we know that largely, again, everyone's getting enough nitrogen because these are growing fairly aggressively. There is notable growth every single day. And we know that they are getting a healthy diet because of that green leaf and aggressive growth. Now, we know that we don't have too much nitrogen either because nobody's exhibiting any signs of burn. And again, there are no other organisms living in here at the bottom of the tank. Easy Freudian slip there. At the bottom of the tent, where there would be any runoff, detritus, rotting leaves, anything that would be a source of food. We deny them that. As a result, no problems. No problems with algae, clearly, but no problems with problematic bacteria or any sort of pathogens beginning to form. Now, if we control this ratio of making sure that nobody gets overfed, nobody gets underfed, and particularly that we don't leave food out for anybody else, this is going to continue to be a very, very happy garden. Well, what did we just learn in our cannabis garden? And how do you think it applies here to this small landscape? These small brown patches are a type of microalgae known as diatoms. They're very, very normal in a lot of fresh tanks. They will continue to dissipate as the nitrifying bacteria continue to populate and outpopulate the diatoms in competition for nitrogen. Another way to mitigate diatoms or lessen their effects is they are a microalgae. We know that algae requires light and nitrogen. Oh, hello, Mr. Goby. That is Homer, and he is a yellow watchman Goby. He's here to help us with our lesson today. He's probably hungry. Oop, there's Bilbo as well. But what do we know about algae? It's a plant, and plants need nitrogen and light. Well, while we wait for the nitrifying bacteria to catch up, we don't want to drop our nitrogen levels super, super low, because that can also create a opportunity for a opportunistic bacteria called cyanobacteria, which is a very, very common bacteria, one of the most common on the planet. Additionally, we also have some little start of some hair algae in the back. But why would we want Because it's food. Because someone needs to eat it. Now, Homer has no interest in hair algae whatsoever. The peppermint shrimp, he also does not care about hair algae. But what do we have back here? That is a red-legged Cortez crab. That is a red-legged Cortez hermit crab. They love to eat algae, and they are voracious little eaters. Now, while we do have little bits of detritus from what we feed Homer left over in the tank, that isn't a varied diet. They naturally are omnivores, so they eat hair algae. So to have them in here helping cleaning everything up, it's not just their only job, but it's their form of getting food. We have to have a small amount for them to eat as well. So we have a small patch. It will continue to dissipate as well as they munch it down, but they have to have a basis of small amount of algae in the tank that is constantly replenishing itself as a food source. So we can clearly tell there's food. Someone's gonna eat it. We can tell there's nitrogen in here because of those diatoms. We can tell that it's nitrogen rich enough because not of the green, but because of the presence of the diatoms themselves are a sign that photosynthesis is happening. Now, it's not aggressive growth, which is what we want. We would not want an explosion in here. That is a sign that someone is not properly sharing. But because we are properly sharing, making sure that everyone gets a little bit of something in our cycle of yum, we do not have problems with bacteria. We just have peppermint shrimp, and they're quite happy to do their thing, climbing our small bonsai tree. We also don't have any problematic levels of bacteria. So we don't need to reduce our nitrogen, and we don't need to reduce our amount of light either, which is only running at, I believe, 10%. So a very, very small draw. I believe about 5 watts. We also don't really have to control the number of diners. We don't have to control the amount of food. Everything seems to be just about right. Well, everyone, that concludes our first lesson for today. Take those concepts of the garden, review them at your leisure, and remember, be good stewards.